I'm realising that we now really should get the audience in and get a few questions. I think we've got some roving mics, I believe. If would anyone else, there's someone right there like to ask a question. Is there a microphone? Somebody got a microphone? Yeah.
The idea of the film seems to be that Chavez is the leader of this revolution throughout the continent. And I'm sure that is very largely true. But to what extent do the panel think that the United States took its eye off the ball by becoming so obsessed with the Middle East, with Iraq, with Afghanistan, and of course with Israel?
The gentleman's basically asking the question about whether, in a sense, that the United States took its eye off the ball in terms of what was happening in Latin America because it was so obsessed with the Middle East.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that has a lot to do with the survival. I thought I had that discussion with Ugo. I mean, I don't think he'd be there if they were really paying attention. I think this comes right at the same time as we're planning for the Iraq move. But it still bugs me that the film opened and all these reviewers tearing the film down, they never mention, very rarely have I seen mention in the United States that we were behind the coup. We knew about it in advance, and there's documentation in there. That never gets mentioned. It's just ignored.
Well, I mean, the leaders, they are very aware that the United States is distracted. I mean, in the first 2 years of the Iraq War, Chavez said to me, but he said that Fidel and I speak every day, and we both got huge maps of the Middle East up on our walls. And we see where the Iraqi resistance is hitting back, and it gives us great joy, because as long as they can distract America, the longer time we have to survive. So it's not that they were unaware of that. They've tried to use their time well. Of course, you know, the big thing they haven't seriously tried to do so far, touch wood, is what they tried with Castro, is try and wipe him out. I mean, they haven't, despite the calls by nutty, sort of born-again Christian preachers on television, who are nutty but have a lot of support saying that Chavez should be bumped off. I mean, that was actually shown on US television. They haven't tried to do that, and he himself is aware of the problems if they had done. So the fact that they were distracted in the Middle East is not unimportant.
Question over there?
I just wondered if you could put a bit more flesh on what you were talking about Obama. It seemed that when Obama went down to Trinidad, it was a kind of place where he could make an easy victory, as opposed to Iran and the Middle East and Afghanistan and China and Kurdistan and so on. You can see where there are much more intractable problems with a lot more complex issues involved. In South America, it seemed when he went down there, he had a great opportunity to start making a real serious impact on changing American foreign policy, and very much in the interests of America. He hasn't, and I wonder what your explanation for that is. Were we sold a bill of goods as somebody wanted to get into the White House? Yes, we can, we'll make a big change. Did he get into the White House and he was shown a bunch of documents by the CIA and the Foreign Office, and he made a genuine change of mind? Or was he too much hostage to the lobby groups and the multinationals, and even in something as simple as the embargo on Cuba, it's impossible to make that change?
Okay, so what's Obama thinking?
That's a fundamental question. It goes back to the heart of it. It is a question of what can the President of the United States do? Is he a puppet? Is he taken to the woodshed, gets a spanking, and read the rules of life, and that's it, like Howard Beale and Network? It's probably that scenario. And I'm thinking about a lot in connection with not only this, but the secret history of the United States. It's clear now from the work we've been showing on film. You know, this is a recurrent theme. It's either the Secretary of State or the Vice President. There's this alter ego every time, and it's like a Jekyll-Hyde complex, where the good president, smiling, Truman comes in, and he's got Jimmy Burns, and he's Mr. Hyde. Jimmy Burns is very strongly anti-Soviet, wants to drop the H-bomb, and does. And then we go on to Eisenhower. Eisenhower is a very benevolent-seeming man, but he's got John Foster Dulles there, and John Foster Dulles is the Secretary of State, and he seems to call the shots, and he's much harder line. As Richard Nixon's also his hatchet man, the Vice President. We had most recently we had Jimmy Carter, another one, and who's his main foreign policy advisor was the Zbigniew Brzezinski. who is an old line anti-communist hawk, waiting for war in Afghanistan. Whatchamacallit, George Bush has, Clinton has, who's the Clinton guy? I forgot. Who was the Clinton Secretary, Vice President? Madeleine Albright. Yeah, Madeleine Albright goes by the book. George Bush, of course, would get, George Bush would get cheeky. And now with Obama, who do you have? I don't know why he picked her. She voted for the war in Iraq. She's guilty. And she lost the election because of that, and he went out and he picked her. First thing. And Robert Gates as Secretary of State. With those two, you got the chickens in the henhouse. I mean, how are you going to change anything? And Hillary Clinton and Gates, the moment he said we're going to get out of Afghanistan at such and such, they undercut that deadline, clearly, and they have done the same thing in South America. She was at Trinidad, too, and she was making her mischief right after Trinidad. And she was down there when we were down there in Ecuador, trying to divide Ecuador from Bolivia, trying to divide Bolivia from Venezuela, and trying to separate Brazil. She's always working her wiles. She's not a good guy. She's the wicked witch of the West. That's what I've ever say.
I'd like to know, I'm interested to know.
I was going to say John Kennedy had Dean Rusk, who was also old school.
I'm interested to know how South American audiences received the film when you toured it there. I was reading an article in an American publication, put it out there, that it flopped in Venezuela box office wise, and the article was alluding to how because it flopped, there was a correlation between that and how audiences thought about it there.
Gentleman's asking basically why. He's saying, how was the reception in South America? He'd read that it flopped into the box office in Venezuela. What does South American audiences think of the film?
Another case of media misinformation, strategically done. Listen, we had a very clear policy for this film in South America. Not everybody goes into the theater. So we had a mix of popular screenings for people who they never went to a theater. They don't go to the theater and they don't want to go to a theater. So we had popular, big outdoor screenings in Venezuela, you know, that where thousands and thousands of people saw it. We had, you know, in Bolivia, we had an outdoor screening for like 7,000 people. In Argentina was the #1 documentary of the year, you know, even more money made than An Inconvenient Truth. So all these things that you are hearing and they've been picked up in the internet, they're totally negative, untrue stories that they're not factual.
It's pretty clear. Question here.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for an absolutely superb film. Also in Britain, it's just as bad. The Guardian, liberal newspaper, terrible lying coverage about Venezuela. Now, what I wanted to challenge you is I think the really interesting story at the moment is in Peru. Do you know about Peru? So in Peru, the government have sold off 70% of the rainforest to oil companies. They massacred indigenous people last year with the support of the disgusting UK government. Very little in the media about this, but what's amazing is you've got 40 different indigenous peoples, some peoples who were uncontacted 20 years ago. They've created a political organisation called A to Z. They use the web and video, and they fight and they win using non-violence. So I'm challenging you to make a film about them.
This wasn't a question. This was a gentleman saying that the story in the case of Peru is incredibly powerful and important. And he'd like you to make a documentary about Peru.
Well, good idea. Someone should do it. You know, the thing is, we can't do everything, and one of the reasons for doing this film, as Oliver has expressed many times, is to encourage young filmmakers in Europe and North America to go out there with a camera and make documentaries. You know, not just wait for someone else to do it. The Peruvian situation, you're right, is horrendous at the moment, but there are incredibly heroic stories also coming out. I mean, the big struggle against electricity privatization, which they won after 3 months of battle against the military. and they defeated the plans to privatize electricity. It's an amazing story. I mean, I saw just briefly one, when I was in Caracas, I saw a Peruvian peasant being interviewed on CNN, and the interviewer said to him, but you know, are you a communist? He said, no, I'm nothing. I'm just a poor guy, a peasant. I'm not a member of any political parties. The guy said, you know, your friends have been killed, you're fighting. Why are you fighting? What for? If you? He said, I'm fighting for one reason. The one thing I know, without being very educated, is that if the electricity is privatized, within 6 months, he said, not more than that, half the villages in Cusco will not be able to afford electricity at all, and we will have to go back to burning oil lamps and lighting candles. That's why we are fighting. So there are lots of stories like this, but in Peru they haven't found the equivalent of a social movement which is transformed and transmogrified into a political party which can win an election. That's the tragedy. Just like Britain.
What's the bias in Britain, Tariq?
It's bad in Britain, but it's bad. Let's not talk about it.